Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavors of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered, and contribute to the community forum. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our construction tech or weekly global Passive House showcase webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Passive House podcast. This is the second episode of 2023, and I'm super excited to have Mary James and Ilka Cassidy here to share another great interview with us today. So Mary and Ilka, welcome back. And how's it going? Mary, what's going on for you in California?
Well, Happy New Year. And it's rain. That's what's going on.
Yeah, no kidding.
We are grateful. I think our local reservoir storage is now up to about 50%, which is wonderful.
That is good. How about you, Ilka?
Yeah, everything's good in Philadelphia. We survived the really cold spell, and now it's actually pretty warm out. But everything's good. Still recovering from the holidays, I guess. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. And my name is Zach Semke. I'm one of the podcast co-hosts, and Matthew Cutler Welsh is another co-host of the podcast, and he is on vacation right now in the summertime in New Zealand, which I'm jealous about right now. Seattle had a crazy ice storm that I fortunately was away for. I was down in the Bay Area during that time, and it wasn't rainy in the Bay Area. So I feel kind of charmed right now in my weather experience the last couple of weeks. So we have a great interview that you both conducted with Leslie Billhymer of Corona Partners Real Estate that we'll get into in a moment. I think before we do that, I just want to take a moment to thank the sponsors that make the Passive House podcast possible. So a big thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Ingwe Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minutair All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification Units, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Thanks also to our champion sponsors, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, Proseco, and Source 2050. And a big thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So Mary and Ilka, you both do a really nice intro with Leslie at the top of the interview. So let's dive right in.
Welcome to our podcast, Leslie Billhymer. You are principal at Corona Partners Real Estate and also a CPHC. You've had an interesting career pathway. And so you start out with a background in architecture, I understand. And then how did you get from there into the field of real estate design and construction management?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for inviting me to come on. I'm thrilled to be here. So I started out as an architectural designer. I was working in New York for a small practice, and that was kind of right at the beginning and middle of the 2008, 9, 10 kind of recession. And in the midst of that, I was invited to work on a DOE project. And so when I left the field of design to work for the Department of Energy Efficient Buildings Hub, it was a pretty big transition for me. I was acquainted with a different type of research than design and construction research. It wasn't spatial or formal, but it did give me a deeper understanding of the vast diversity of kind of professions, interests, and stakeholders that play roles in the building industry beyond architecture. And perhaps most importantly, it helped me kind of reorient my understanding of what drives market decisions, particularly in, commercial buildings or large multifamily buildings. And, I kind of sometimes, much to my chagrin, I've, learned and understood more deeply that it's often not how beautiful a building is or how clever the architectural design is. It's, a whole set of other, factors. So I was fortunate to be able to do some research that related to small and medium-sized commercial buildings where I collaborated with other researchers at the hub that were working close to the actual energy efficiency building projects in the regional market here around Philadelphia. And this interested me, and I knew that I, wanted to go build and work on real projects as a next step in my work. So I, and while I was at the DOE, I, became acquainted with a lot of the leaders here in the local market who are working on, high performance design. I met, the first people in the area who had gotten their passive house certification as, certified passive house consultants with both FIAS and fee. And I knew that I really wanted to build expertise in energy efficiency that would help me, tackle energy efficiency from a more holistic perspective and work in conjunction with architects. And it would enable me, to kind of hit the ground running once I left the research sphere. And so, after that, I started managing energy efficiency projects for single buildings and for groups of buildings at the portfolio scale for an ESCO, a small kind of startup energy services company. And then about 3 or 4 years after that, I started working, with Corona Partners and, bringing that kind of expertise to managing building projects as a project manager, and then also sometimes as an energy efficiency consultant in our practice here. That is based here in Philadelphia. We do work here in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania and Delaware and New Jersey.
So when you were meeting people who were certified as passive house consultants, did you take the training yourself then? And when was that?
I did. I took the training in 2014 and took the exam that year as well.
Yeah, and we actually met in Philadelphia at one of the first passive house group meetings, I think.
Yes.
And I'm actually really excited that you're on the podcast because I always kind of admired your different perspective. You were always kind of looking at numbers and things that typical architects maybe aren't as fluent with. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit more of what you actually do now. So I'm curious about your work at Corona Partners and in particular the clients that you have. Can you tell us a little bit more about the clients and the projects that you're working on?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So we do project management, portfolio strategy, and kind of asset management process and planning. We have a diversity of types of clients and work right now. We're working on several buildings for a large social services not-for-profit that I think we'll discuss a couple of those projects in more detail here. We are the owner's representative for the Provident Mutual Life building rehabilitation, and it's a 350,000 square foot multi-tenant commercial building. We're also working for an HOA on a big capital improvement project for a large kind of center city Philadelphia multifamily residential tower. And also have some interesting work with the rebuild project within the city of Philadelphia to help them gain cost certainty and strategize their project order and spending allocations across the dozens of sites that they're working to kind of rehabilitate new parks and recreation centers. And I think renovations on libraries that they're working to accomplish in lower income neighborhoods in the city here. So a good diversity. I would just add, as our practice kind of gets bigger and, as we're addressing more different types of projects, we've taken on, a couple of these kind of types of these projects in the last 2 years. We're growing. We are right now kind of working on defining our service delivery norms and understanding how they can translate kind of our company values into real project work. So we're a values-driven organization. That's why our clients, I think, are attracted to us in part, and why they ultimately choose us. And one of our values identifies that success is more about cost than time. Another is rigorous sustainability. And a third to note is individual respect. So we're, soft on people and hard on problems is kind of the way that we describe that. And I think that the work of owners representation and project management is interesting. We try to translate an organization's values into kind of the built environment and kind of what is actually what is the result, in the architectural design, the engineering, the buildings that we choose for our clients. And so that how we deliver services in our day-to-day, kind of week-to-week, phase-to-phase, project-to-project norms are that's a big question for us right now. Like, what are the common elements across all of these types of work?
That's a lot of projects. How many people are there at Corona Partners?
We have 8 employees right now.
And you're doing a lot of retrofit work or managing existing buildings and trying to bring more energy efficiency to them. It sounds like, I guess there's one that you're working at called the North Preston Street Redevelopment Project. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Sure. This is a about 10,000 square foot building in West Philadelphia. So it's kind of a small commercial building. It's a good example where we were able to kind of develop and build a high performance standard within the project work that was heavily informed by Passive House, but it wasn't what the client asked for per se. The project is a new home for Elwyn's adult behavioral health program in Philadelphia. And they were moving from a larger kind of a space within a larger kind of healthcare building that was, very visible and identifiable on a main street here in Philadelphia to this kind of smaller brick building that's on the National Register of Historic Buildings. It's very close by to the other building, but it really kind of provides kind of a home for this one program. I think that this project is interesting. I can mention a couple things about our process here, and it kind of got us where we are in terms of the high performance work. So the first thing to mention is that we developed a people plan and use case that set the project goals and identified what the building needs are, what the staff will need, and what the clients will need. So we had that use case identified that the staff and the clients needed to love spending time in the building, was comfortable, and was as energy efficient as possible. We were also really constrained by this building. It was hard for the client to actually find a building to enter into a long-term lease in this neighborhood, but they needed to be in the neighborhood because it, serves their population. And but the space was actually smaller than their currently held space in the nearby building, that, like I mentioned. But with a talented architect, we were able to actually reduce the footprint of the program and downsize the space overall. So that initial kind of use case and kind of strategic thinking document where we identified the goals of the project allowed us to kind of think carefully about the nature of the work and the activities, and ultimately downsize the footprint of the space. We didn't count one office for one employee, for example, which is maybe a practice for architectural planning that's outmoded. The smaller footprint meant that we were going to have more budget per square foot to spend on the building. And I think that, this part in a design process where you are thinking just about, how people are going to use the space and the activities that are going to take place there relates to the conversation about the changing nature of workspaces now. And I think that, building performance has a lot to say about within the context of that conversation, and needs to take kind of like a big role in that conversation. It has been, thinking intelligently about, moving clients to spaces that really suit their needs, and, takes part during this use case step. And oftentimes folks are downsizing their spaces.
Just a quick question. So they decided not to buy the building, they're leasing the building, correct?
Right. It's a 20-year lease.
Okay. And then who's paying for the improvements? Is that the owner or is that Elwyn?
So it is Elwyn in this case. It's often times that we take on, a lease, and the owner will give us some money per square foot for fit out renovations as a part of that lease negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say in some building projects, it's a combination of funding sources. It'll be sometimes the organization, but also the building owner.
Okay. So then Elwyn basically had to pay for the improvements. And how do you finance the, above and beyond improvements that way?
Mm-hmm.
Because Elwyn is a nonprofit organization,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Yeah, they're a large social services organization. So they had given up a long-term, or they sold a building nearby, and several of the programs, including this behavioral health program, that were formerly located in that building. And they, of course, have proceeds from the sale, but they also have, there are a lot of kind of cost liabilities that, came off of their balance sheet at that time of sale. Also, Elwyn is, I think they have like over 5,000 employees. They're a large organization, so they have a capital budget that they allocated, funds for this project. And it's they have their own internal process to understand how much they can allocate for different building projects based on the revenue from the different programs that they're setting up spaces for.
Mm-hmm. And then you just worked with someone with Elwyn to determine basically your energy efficiency goals, and then they
Mm-hmm.
basically represented that goal towards the organization.
Yeah, sustainability is a long-term is a value of the organization of Elwyn. Projects that we've been working with on them recently focus on the experience of their staff and clients in the buildings. Also, this is an old building. It's built in 1902. It's on the National Register. It's some big building envelope risks that needed to be addressed. And we kind of positioned that high performance building science gives us a toolkit for dealing with these envelope vulnerabilities. This became part of the background in making the case for utilizing the standards recommended design and construction strategies. We didn't lead with Passive House, certainly, but we were very realistic about identifying, the risks that needed to be acknowledged and dealt with over the course of the design and the construction process. There was water coming into the basement. The roof had this old kind of louvered glass skylight that had originally, provided access to natural light into the core of this building, and it had this, kind of cooling stack effect ventilation. And so we were totally changing, the nature of the use of that building. We were changing the thermodynamics and the physics of the way that it was originally designed to kind of operate. And so we needed to really shore up that building envelope and not expose the building and the organization to more risk by just, kind of throwing up some drywall and putting all these mechanical systems in the building that could have led to, the condensation and all of those problems that I'm sure we're all very familiar with. So I think we remembered that, and we were careful about a few things to kind of support the discussion on this project. So we know that few people lead with wanting Passive House, but they do want high quality and high performance buildings. We told the story of the building performing for their clients and staff and wanting to make it a place where people wanted to come day in, day out. it's a very comfortable building. I was just, walking through last week, and they don't have the systems up and running on the top 3 floors, but they had some heat in the basement, and I, walked around in a sweater for a couple of hours. We wanted to help them manage the building risks and kind of be proactive instead of reactive, which is something that they're trying to pivot, that they're trying to make overall in their kind of building property management, work across the pretty big portfolio of buildings that they operate in. And we also were careful to know that, the perfect can't be the enemy of the good. We didn't pursue certification, but we, which in any case, I would always recommend that someone do. I'm a huge advocate for that. And I think it kind of always is going to drive more performance into your project regardless. But, we didn't feel like we could kind of, take it to that level with this project. And so until Passive House is mandatory, we need to frame kind of building work in this way so it becomes attractive and valuable for the end users. And the conversation starts with understanding the keys to the business and the success of the people that work there.
Of course, all these changes they take upfront capital to upfront investments to make them happen. And I know that you work with helping clients finance costs. And one of the methods that you've been involved with, I think, is still new to maybe many of our audience members, C-PACE financing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I have worked on a couple of C-PACE projects out of state. The C-PACE program has been active here in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia for at least 3 years, I want to say.
Let's define it's the commercial arm of PACE financing, which is for...
It's property assessed clean energy. That's what PACE is, property assessed clean energy.
It finances efficiency improvements onto your tax bill instead of getting a loan some other way, so that if the building owner sells the building, the costs continue to be associated with their tax bills rather than the loan on the building per se. So,
right. That's 100% right. It's long-term financing. So my understanding, it's up to 30 years of financing. And I think the rates depend on some different factors when you're actually qualifying and applying for the financing, but they're, kind of competitive with other lending rates at any given time. Like you said, it's assessed with property taxes and it's senior to all debt. So if you are you have a mortgage on a property, the PACE financing debt kind of supersedes the mortgage in priority. There's no acceleration in default, at least here in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. So which means that, say you don't have to then pay, the full term of your loan because you've missed, a couple payments or something. I think that's an important factor. They'll work with you to make sure that you can become current. And it's usually municipally sponsored. So you have organizations in wherever you are working, like Philadelphia has a municipal sponsor for the C-PACE program here that'll help you qualify a project. Typically, it's the C stands for commercial. So it's any commercial building, owned by for-profit company, a nonprofit. They recently passed legislation enabling multifamily buildings of 5 units or more to be eligible for this financing. And I think it's a really great solution for properties that have a history of deferred investment or maintenance, where owners feel like they're just never going to have the cash to do the appropriate upgrades and they need financing to address them. We're working, I think Ilka is familiar with this project, working on starting another project in Germantown, neighborhood of Philadelphia, where we think that C-PACE may play a role in the financing and, getting the resources together to do the work.
Interesting. So are there any other programs that you typically that are typically resources for you?
There are, so to speak fluently about them, I can't do that right now, but I can direct listeners to a good resource. So at least in the area. I know that, the office that supports the CPACE program here in Philadelphia also supports a number of other kind of energy efficiency financing programs. And these programs or loan products may be relevant not only here, but in, around the country. And that's the Philadelphia Energy Authority. So folks they're a great resource.
Mm-hmm. And then in order to take advantage of CPACE, do you have to have a certain kind of education as, CPHC, or do they accept something else as?
Yes. So actually here you can, they require kind of an energy report similar to an energy audit that goes through the kind of physical and technical aspects of a building and its systems, and, identifies energy consumption characteristics of those systems in the building overall. And when the program was initially started here in Philadelphia, they listed a set of, professional qualifications that you had to have. And those were, a mechanical and an engineer. You could be a certified energy manager, but they didn't initially accept folks with the CPHC certification. They since have adopted that, a CPHC can complete and kind of authorize and sign one of these reports. But when I really wanted to be able to, write these reports and have that kind of technical accreditation. So I got my sort of CEM, Certified Energy Manager accreditation. And I finished the accreditation right at the time that they said CPHC is okay to have too. So that was kind of a funny, just an irony. But yeah, I think it's fabulous that they, and rightly so, that they expanded that to CPHCs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I actually checked out the CEM requirements online, and it's pretty involved.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm impressed.
I remember the first couple of days, I'm like, oh, I've got this. Like CPHC gave me what I need to know. And then I got into like the third day and I was like, wait a second, eating my words.
So, and then you actually do a lot of on-site visits and quality control and construction administration, right? This is probably something that really helps you on site then, talking to all the contractors and everyone involved. And a lot of times you share a lot of the contractors are actually not Passive House certified or don't really have that background. How do you communicate all those goals and make sure that they get built the way, accordingly?
Yes. I mean, I think this is such an interesting topic. And we learned so much working on that West Philadelphia project that we've been talking about. So, in any project, there's this kind of chasm between like the specification of the building and the drawings and, the architect's expertise and the engineer's expertise and all that it is involved in the kind of design phase of the work. And then, you move over to the execution and, you hand off all that documentation to the building team, the builder, the GC, whoever it is on any project. And that kind of, and when the construction phase starts, there are a whole host of issues that come into play, especially if you're working with a team that hasn't built to, say, a high performance standard before. So I think that we, on this project, we built in time for the architect and for me, myself, the energy consultant, to be present on site during the construction of the project. On a weekly basis, we would do almost every week, we would do a site visit and then we would take photos and we would, memorialize information, or, to file in the form of memos after those visits. But there was a lot of, just learning along the way. The project manager practices on the builder side are super relevant. There's someone that needs to there's the project manager, and then there's also the foreman who's on site 100% of the time. There's the site condition and the cleanup of the site on a regular basis. I would argue that, it's hard to build a high performance building if your site isn't really clean, because you've got to protect kind of the vapor barriers on site. And oftentimes you're using kind of like fabric like membranes, or, plastic membranes that can get punctured and, have holes. There are issues that relate to kind of the changes of the staff of the builders on site, the staff cycling. There are often different languages spoken on site. So it's really helpful to have the project manager or the foreman, be able to speak the languages, of the workers on site. These are all kind of issues that we didn't kind of anticipate kind of ahead of time, but we were definitely kind of, meeting and trying to manage through as best we could over the course of the building, because there were enough actors that we needed to think about how to be effective in that oral tradition of kind of saying, this is how we're going to detail this, because a lot of the important details didn't necessarily end up getting a sketch from the architect. And so there was just that important time of when we were at the site visit, that explanation of making sure that what the architect said was understood by, the project manager and the foreman on site.
And did you do mock-ups? Did you use mock-ups at all?
We did. We did a few mock-ups, the wall assembly, the installation of the window, and pipe penetrations through the ceiling and along the envelope walls. The wall assembly mock-up we had to redo 3 times before we got it right. We did, a whole section of the wall, adjusting the location of the stud wall and the way that the Intello vapor barrier was applied. Bringing the
that sounds like
layer.
It was very useful.
Oh, 100%. It was critical. Bringing the Viscon layer out further onto the floor and up on the ceilings. It was great.
Now kind of moving on to this next project, the one in Germantown, which is right in my neighborhood, which is great. So I can go and check it out whenever I want. So, but I'm really curious about it because it's 3 historic buildings, correct? And it's fully occupied at the moment. It is owned, or they are owned by Elwyn. And there are definitely a lot of, and it's very specific use of, occupants. So, there's a lot of things that you're going to have to bring into, sync basically. So what is your plan there? And of course, high performance is always, one of the goals, because there's so many reasons why you're pursuing that. So, can you talk a little bit more about that project and what your thoughts are?
Yes. I'd love to talk about this project. I mean, this project is very much a work in process, and we're at the very beginning of it. I think it's going to be one of those really tricky challenges. As you mentioned, these are historic buildings. By American standards, they're ancient. They were built in the late 1700s. They are protected. The facades are protected. They are occupied by folks with behavioral and or mental health disabilities. So everything that we do will need to prioritize the experience of those residents. The goal is to address all of the structural and life safety risk and to bring those buildings up to kind of a good living standard for the occupants. The owner is Elwyn, and they've owned these buildings for a long time, for about 20 years, but there has been kind of a history of disinvestment. There are, did I mention there are 3 buildings, and it totals about 15,000 to 20,000 square feet. So again, it's like this building stock that I'm really passionate about, these like kind of small commercial multifamily buildings. So we're at the very beginning of the process. We're trying to identify the right architect partner. The architect needs to be able to kind of really hold the hand of this project, be close to be able to come to site, be very closely involved with the actual construction and the renovations that will take place. We're thinking about the project in terms of kind of a long-term, 1 to 5 year plan. And because this relates to the kind of pace of funding that's going to come available. We think we're going to need more funding than the funding that has been, earmarked for the project, just because of the nature of the state of the buildings right now. But we have that funding to start with. I think CPACE might be a good solution here, but we haven't really even started that conversation yet. I think the building performance element of this project is important. I think it would be a mistake to just kind of make a list of the life safety and structural vulnerabilities of the project and then just kind of go through and kind of work on those areas of the buildings and just say when we're through with the list, we're done. There is a real opportunity to look at these buildings more holistically and look at kind of the full 3D envelopes of all of these 3 buildings and think about the building performance kind of running as a kind of a brother, a sister track alongside the project that's going to be riding in tandem with all of the work that's done. We know the best way that I know how to drive performance factors is to establish the standards at the front of the project and then make sure that all the consultants are kind of following them. But not only that, they're really on board with meeting them. So in this case, I think the standards need to relate to a full investigation of the envelope vulnerabilities, not just, the visually perceivable ones, and then following on the standards, develop standards for air sealing and insulation, around all sides of those buildings. There are some kind of water issues that I think are impacting at least one of the buildings. So we're going to address that. In other projects kind of similar to this, I've been the energy consultant, but here I'm the project manager and also potentially the energy consultant, maybe not. So we'll see how that goes. But I think that there might be the opportunity in the first step of the project, which is going to be this kind of deep kind of current condition investigation, the feasibility study, to make sure that we are acknowledging all the kind of building comfort, building health issues like, infiltration. And we start to kind of describe the levels of, air sealing or insulation that they have in their current conditions, so that kind of sets us up for that conversation of how to tackle that from the design and engineering, down the road.
Yeah, no, I think, it's just such an interesting building type. And it's actually a very typical building type here in Germantown, because these buildings were all built as these like really large single family homes. I'm not sure if those 3, they were probably single family homes too at that time. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they were they may have had like public uses, but maybe one of or two of them. But yeah, they may have been single family homes as well.
Yeah, and over time, they've gone through so many different usage. Even the office that I'm in, it was built as this giant single family home. And then I think at some point, it was, I don't know, I think a church moved in and then became a nursing home. And then it became a fraternity. And then we rescued it. We bought it.
And then you're like, I have to have that frat house.
Yeah, it was interesting going through this after they moved out. But we just kind of put it back together, and it's all offices now. So it's a totally different usage as it was intended to be. And that's very, very typical here in Germantown. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a stunning building. You're building there, and it must have been a tricky building to address if you did do any air sealing. I mean, we're going to confront all of those issues. I'm very curious about solutions where you can, kind of work behind a wall without going and seeing every square inch of that wall. I know that there are some products out there that at least attest to being effective, kind of blown in insulation products. Maybe those will be relevant, but, maybe not. We're replacing all of the mechanical systems as well, and we'll probably have to replace the windows as well. So,
well, it certainly sounds like you're going to be employing quite a broad range of your skills on this project. It's still very much at an early stage. And do you see this breadth of skills that you've developed as being related somehow to your socialization as a woman, or what do you think inspired you to acquire so many skills rather than specializing in one area?
I think that this is a really interesting topic, and I can only speak for myself, and not one norm kind of or rule applies to 100% of any one person. But I think it's good to have this conversation and speak about the importance of diversity within the profession. Multiple professional kind of circles that take part in the building industry. But I think that two things I personally want to keep doing in my work is to continuously build technical skills and knowledge, and the work of helping teams be more effective. I think something that is maybe related to my socialization is a high level of comfort with not knowing the answer. I enjoy working with groups of people, and I really enjoy the excitement and active process of facilitation and kind of communal decision making or problem solving. So perhaps those roles in building, design, and construction teams don't often or those two sets of expertise don't often reside in one person. I'm not sure, but I do think that my background in building energy science from Passive House and the certified energy manager training has given me more confidence to dive into territory where kind of architecture and engineering meet, and to have kind of deeper technical discussions during the kind of design and construction process. And I love that. I think that more building, more kind of building professionals like architects, engineers, builders, certainly, and all, the full array of consultants should take formal facilitation training, because I don't know, every building I've ever worked on, there have always been like tricky problems where you need to have kind of a calm, kind of organized process for understanding the problem, making sure you have all the right information, that you need, and then coming up with a solution. A lot of times people jump right to a solution before they fully understand the problem, or they get all the relevant information kind of on the table. And we certainly need rigorous processes and decision-making, and decision-making processes in the work of building high-performance buildings. And I think that kind of understanding how do you convene groups, and how do you and giving some thought and attention to, something as simple as like, how do you develop a meeting agenda to work really effectively as a group? And what are your kind of norms for how people should kind of participate in that meeting, and what are your goals for any given meeting? This type of work can be very kind of constructive and helpful to the work of building buildings.
Well, I think what you're describing has actually a lot to do with having a lot of empathy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, just facilitating meetings like that and understanding everyone and what everyone brings to the table. And I think we can all learn from that to work better as teams and not as competitors.
I totally agree. I think getting more comfortable with thinking, like you're saying, from someone else's perspective, what their goals are, what their kind of professional context is, and asking questions is a good place to start. Yeah.
Absolutely. I loved what you said about, not jumping immediately to having the answer without fully exploring the issue. That's great. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate hearing about everything that you're doing. It's quite exciting.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
That was an interview with Leslie Billhymer of Corona Partners Real Estate. Ilka and Mary, thanks so much for bringing that interview to us. Ilka, maybe we can start with you. What were some highlights for you?
Yeah, first of all, I was just really happy to reconnect with Leslie. I've known her for quite some time now, and I was always very interested in her perspectives, basically, because she has such a broad base of knowledge from all different sides, being an architect and having that financial background and all that knowledge in building science. So I think it's just great the way to see how she approaches these projects, just in such a holistic way and perspective. And I think for those projects, you really, really need someone who does that, to really, really set the goals for the project and hold everyone accountable to it, and get everyone, to sit at one table and solve problems or find solutions. And I thought it was really interesting when she talked about that she thinks everyone should have training in being a facilitator, because I think that's just so true. If you have so many different perspectives and so many people involved in a project, that you are able to communicate well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also struck by how thoughtful she was about mission and values, both, I think, reflecting back on her Corona Partners and that commitment that they have to really examine their service delivery norms and how that translates their company values, but also their client, the partner, Elwyn, looking at, I think she mentioned their focus now on really working to be proactive instead of reactive, and the role that, these projects has in helping kind of make that transition happen. So she's very thoughtful. How about you, Mary? What were some highlights for you?
Well, I just was impressed by the beginning of her career, that she was I'm sure, a great grounding in energy efficiency practices when she worked at the University of Pennsylvania and for a DOE project on market adoption of energy efficiency practices, which is, as we all know, it's such a tough nut to try and crack. And it was interesting that was under President Obama, and that's where the funding came from. And, here we are back with President Biden, and he's refunding building energy efficiency. So it's an exciting time to hopefully get better insight into retrofits in a cost-effective way, which is basically what her work has grown into.
Yeah. And another reminder of what a game changer the Inflation Reduction Act may be in our space, for sure.
When you have a 5 to 7 year payback, that for many commercial buildings, that's what they need in terms of investing in energy efficiency. And to try and figure out what works within that within those constraints is really tough, because so many commercial buildings and also residential ones haven't had the investment in them that you can make a significant improvement in the building's performance when you look at measures that need to have a 5 to 7 year payback. So I think her expertise in this is really valuable.
Yeah, and why things like CPACE financing are so helpful as well, because they're, longer term. You can then look at the long-term benefit of energy efficiency and how that finally, starts to really pay back financially. Whenever we're retrofitting a building, we're adding tremendous value. The tricky part is being able to realize that value with dollars and cents for developers, and so we are, I think, fortunate to have creative people like Leslie working to crack that nut.
Yeah, I think that's particularly interesting on projects like the one that she was talking about here in Germantown, because it's such an old and historic building stock, and over so many years, there's just been such a change in the occupants and how these buildings are being used, and also how the owners are able or not able to finance better or not so great updates to the building. And I'm really curious, and I'm definitely going to keep checking on the project, since it's right up the street from me, how they're going to really work through this project. I mean, it's an amazing project, and I'm so happy that Leslie's one of the people that is trying to make it work.
Yeah, not for the faint of heart.
No, definitely not.
Really, I mean, you have to bring such expertise in financing and in effective retrofit measures to tackle something like that. And there's so many buildings like that. It's an exciting project.
Yeah. I also like that she, at some point, I think maybe before or after we recorded, she talked about the building performer. That's something that she does, and she described it as basically being similar to an energy model, just with a different perspective. So I thought that was really interesting, because that's a perspective that I typically don't have, or I don't have that knowledge. So it was great to hear her talk about that.
Yeah, speaking our language.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Ilka and Mary, thanks again for a really great interview. And I think all of us will be excited to see and very interested to see the progress of these projects, particularly that Germantown project. So I think it's time to share some things that are coming up. One thing is that the International Passive House Conference that's happening in Germany in March is now open for registrations. So we'll include a link to that registration page for folks. A crew of us will be at the conference, including Ilka and Mary and myself. So we'd love to see you there and hope that you can join us. And we're going to be conducting a bunch of interviews at that conference. At the Passive House Accelerator, we are about to launch our programming for 2023 this week. So on January 11th, on Wednesday, we're having our first Passive House Accelerator live event. And there are two really important things that I want to announce. One is that all of our Passive House Accelerator live events are changing their time. So we used to do these at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and we are shifting to noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. So our apologies to folks in Australia and New Zealand. I know that is either in the middle of the night or super earlier in the morning. We are working on some potential programming that will be better suited for your time zone. But we do hope that folks in Europe and elsewhere will be able to access the programs. So that's the first announcement. The second announcement is that we are adding 2 series within Passive House Accelerator Live. So in addition to Project Showcase and Construction Tech, which will happen every 3rd and 4th Wednesday of the month now, we're adding a 101 series every 1st Wednesday and a Next Gen series every 2nd Wednesday. So this week is the 2nd Wednesday of the month. So we're starting with the Next Gen. This is going to be introducing Next Gen, what's next for the future, spelled with a PH, of building. And so we're going to be looking at how the next generation of Passive House practitioners are shaping the future of building. And we're joined by Zoe Kaufman of NREL and Carmel Pratt of Bright Power on this inaugural episode of the Next Gen series. So we hope you join us at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. And there are other events that are coming up, so we'll include a link to that in the show notes so that you can check that out. I think that's it. So Mary and Ilka, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's great.
And everyone, thank you for listening. We're really happy to have you here. Next week, we'll be joined again with co-host Matthew Cutler-Welsh for another episode of Passive House Podcast. Until then, be well.